Chapter 1. Quickman Ton, the Young Legend. Caleb Ton, once known by everyone as Quickman Ton, had been a legend in his youth. The stories of his speed and skill traveled far and wide across Singapore. People would often recall how a young Caleb could catch a fly in his hand before anyone even noticed it moving. It was this incredible reflex, this unmatched quickness, that earned him his nickname and the admiration of all who witnessed him in action. In those days, he was not just a boy. He was a phenomenon. He had trained tirelessly, balancing the grace of lion dancing with the precision of martial arts. Every move, every step, and every kick was calculated, yet it looked effortless. The streets and temples of Singapore remembered the echoes of his footsteps and the cheers of crowds. At Chinese New Year, the young Quickman Ton was the star of every celebration. People waited eagerly for the moment when he would emerge from the giant lion's head, his feet moving like lightning, his body spinning and turning in perfect harmony with the rhythm of drums. But time, as it always does, passed on. Today, Caleb was 70 years old. His hair had long since turned silver, and his body bore the signs of age. Yet, in the small cafe he ran with his wife May, the old spark still lingered in his eyes. The walls of the cafe were decorated with photographs of lion dancers, all captured in mid-movement, their bodies twisting and leaping in celebration of a tradition that Caleb had mastered. Many of the images featured Caleb himself, frozen forever in youthful glory, a reminder of the man he once was. Though his reflexes were no longer what they had been, Caleb loved to tell stories of his youth to anyone who would listen. Tourists, neighbors, and sometimes even casual passers-by were drawn into his tales of speed, agility, and daring feats. He would gesture with his hands, moving them in the air as if the stories were dances themselves. Children, wide-eyed and amazed, often watched him with awe, trying to copy the movements that seemed magical to their young eyes. "See this," Caleb would say, spinning his hands like wheels. "This is how you move under the lion's head. Quick, precise, like the wind itself." And even though his feet no longer followed the lightning rhythm of his youth, his passion and love for the art were unmistakable. To Caleb, the stories were as real as the past itself. In every word he spoke, in every demonstration, he relived the moments that had made him famous. May, his patient wife, often smiled gently at his tales. She had learned long ago that correcting Caleb was futile. He believed every story fully, every feat performed perfectly in the mind's eye, even if the body no longer agreed. Yet, she knew the cafe depended on more than nostalgia. It was their livelihood. While Caleb talked, she worked tirelessly to ensure the customers were served, balancing the demands of the business with her husband's unending chatter. Sometimes she would gently call out, "Caleb, please, we have orders to fill." But Caleb only laughed, waving her concerns aside, lost in memory and pride. Caleb's son, Henry, was a quiet and competent man who handled most of the kitchen's work. Unlike his father, Henry did not live in the past. He dreamed quietly of growing the cafe, making it a place that could survive and thrive for years to come. Yet, he had a deep respect for his father, and tolerated the endless stories with patience. While Caleb spoke of victories and dances, Henry prepared meals, watched over customers, and ensured the business stayed afloat. Despite the slow pace of his current life, Caleb still retained glimpses of the skill that had once earned him fame. Every now and then, he would demonstrate a lion dance move to a child or tourist, spinning lightly, raising his arms, and moving with the rhythm embedded in muscle memory. Though slower, the precision and elegance of his movements reminded everyone of the man he had been. Even strangers could see it. The man had once been unstoppable, a master of motion and timing. To Caleb, these moments of teaching were not work. They were a connection to the past, a chance to relive a life filled with applause, admiration, and excitement. The cafe, while simple and modest, became a stage for his memories. He would recount the time he had performed under a massive lion's head, the weight pressing down, his feet moving faster than any drumbeat could demand. The young children would gape in amazement as Caleb mimicked kicks, spins, and jumps, his silver hair shining in the cafe's afternoon light. Quick, precise, like the wind, he would repeat, eyes twinkling. You must feel it in your bones, not with your hands, not with your eyes. Feel it with your whole body. And even though the children could not match the speed of Quickman Tan, they learned respect for the discipline, the dedication, and the joy that Caleb embodied. Visitors often left the cafe with a story to tell. Tourists would carry tales of the old man who danced like the heroes in kung fu films, who spoke of a life that seemed larger than ordinary, and who reminded them that greatness was not just about skill. It was about passion, memory, and pride. For the locals, Caleb was a bridge between generations. He reminded them of traditions, of the art of lion dance, and of the extraordinary abilities of one remarkable young man. Though age had slowed him, Caleb Tan had not been forgotten. In the minds of those who visited, in the laughter of the children, and in the wide-eyed wonder of tourists, the legend lived on. Quickman Tan was no longer just a name from history. He was a presence, a storyteller, a teacher, and a man whose past greatness could still inspire awe. In this chapter, the story captures Caleb's transition from celebrated youth to respected elder, highlighting the beauty of memory, the joy of storytelling, and the pride of legacy. Caleb may have slowed with age, but in spirit, in memory, and in heart, he remained the same Quickman Tan who had once danced under the lion's head and captured the world's attention with every swift and perfect move. Chapter 2. Life in the Cafe. The cafe was a warm, familiar place, filled with the rich aroma of coffee, freshly cooked rice, and the occasional hint of soy sauce and spices. For Caleb Tan, it was more than just a business. It was a stage, a living scrapbook of memories, and a place where the past and present intertwined. Every photograph on the walls, every framed image of the Chinese lion dance, reminded him of who he had been. Quickman Tan, the fastest, the most agile, the one who had captured the hearts of crowds across Singapore. But time had moved on, as it always does. Caleb was no longer the quick, nimble young man who could leap, spin, and catch the smallest object mid-air. His body had slowed, his steps were measured, and his reflexes, once unmatched, had softened with age. Yet in the cafe, he remained as energetic in spirit as ever, a storyteller who lived in a world where he was still the master of the lion dance, the kung fu demonstrations, and the tales of glory. Mei Mei, his devoted wife, ran a quiet balancing act between keeping the cafe functional and allowing her husband the freedom to relive his past. She had long ago learned that correcting Caleb or urging him to focus on work was nearly impossible. His stories, his gestures, and his dramatic reenactments were as natural to him as breathing. While he entertained the children with quick spins of his hands and spinning feet, or regaled tourists with tales of contests and dances, Mei moved behind the counter, taking orders, serving dishes, and calming the occasional frustrated customer. "Caleb, please," she would whisper, just enough for him to hear, but not so loud as to embarrass him. "We have more orders waiting." But Caleb would only laugh, gesturing with his hands, demonstrating how he once turned like a wheel beneath the heavy lion's head. "See, this is the art," he said, his eyes sparkling. "Quick, precise, like the wind itself. You must feel it." It was a delicate dance. The cafe needed attention, but Caleb needed to tell his stories. Tourists often paused mid-meal, watching the old man demonstrate moves from decades ago. Children clapped and tried to follow his gestures, giggling as they stumbled. Loyal patrons smiled indulgently, entertained by the spectacle, even if their lunch took longer than expected. The cafe was alive, chaotic, and full of warmth, but always tinged with a hint of tension. Henry, Caleb and Mei's only son, carried the weight of responsibility quietly. At 40, he had grown into a skilled cook, an efficient manager, and a dreamer who sometimes lost himself in thoughts of how to improve the cafe. Unlike his father, Henry lived firmly in the present. He didn't relive past glories or seek applause for skill. He focused on the work, ensuring the cafe could provide for the family and sustain itself for the future. Yet, even Henry respected his father deeply. He understood that Caleb's stories were more than mere nostalgia. They were a legacy, a way to keep culture and tradition alive. Henry tolerated the delays, the interruptions, and the moments when customers' patience waned. He had learned that there was no arguing with the man who once danced under the lion's head for thousands of cheering spectators. Instead, he worked around it, guiding Caleb subtly, hoping the old man could find small ways to help without slowing down the business entirely. The dynamic between the three of them defined daily life in the cafe. Caleb, lost in memory and pride, Mei, tirelessly ensuring that the business ran smoothly, and Henry, bridging the gap between the man of the past and the demands of the present. Together, they formed a fragile balance, one that relied on patience, love, and understanding. The cafe thrived because of their cooperation, even if the tension between story and work was ever present. Chinese New Year brought its own challenges and joys. The cafe was busier than ever during this season, and every table demanded attention. Friends, tourists, and local families came in droves, hoping for good food and warm hospitality. Caleb, of course, could not resist recounting tales of the lion dances he had performed, the competitions he had won, and the skills that had earned him his legendary nickname. He would gesture dramatically, moving his hands in sweeping circles, turning like a wheel, and mimicking fight sequences that had once impressed the crowds. Mei, her arms full with trays of food, would sigh quietly, balancing the demands of customers with the need to ensure that Caleb did not disrupt service too much. "Please, Caleb," she would mutter, though often it was too late. He was already demonstrating a mid-air kick to a group of fascinated children. Still, there were rewards. People loved to hear the stories, to see the old moves, to learn from someone who had lived through history and tradition. Caleb's presence gave the cafe character, making it unique in a city filled with countless eateries. Tourists often left with wide eyes and laughter, telling tales of the quick old man who could still show the skills of a champion. Locals nodded knowingly, proud that someone of Caleb's caliber was part of their community. Yet, despite the entertainment and admiration, the tension was palpable. Caleb was living fully in the past, while Maymay and Henry struggled with the realities of the present. Orders had to be delivered, meals had to be cooked, and customers had to be satisfied. The cafe could not survive on stories alone. Maymay worked tirelessly, ensuring that the dishes were timely, the tables clean, and the customers happy. Henry prepared the meals, often dreaming silently of the future possibilities, while also tolerating his father's interruptions with patience and care. Through it all, Caleb remained oblivious to the strain his stories sometimes caused. He saw only the joy of memory, the thrill of teaching, and the pride in showing the younger generation what he once could do. The children loved him, the tourists admired him, and he believed the cafe existed to give him a stage. In his eyes, every story was worth the minor chaos it created. This chapter captures the tension between past glory and present responsibility. Caleb is a man clinging to memory, while his family works tirelessly to keep daily life in order. It is a portrait of aging, the importance of family support, and the delicate balance between passion and practicality. Caleb's life in the cafe is both joyous and challenging, a reminder that even legends must adapt to the flow of time, and that love often comes with compromise and understanding. As the sun sets over the busy streets of Singapore, Caleb continues to tell his stories, spinning his hands and feet in demonstrations of long-past glory. Maymay and Henry work diligently beside him, keeping the cafe alive, keeping the family fed, and keeping the past and present delicately intertwined. Life in the cafe is full, warm, and alive, but always on the edge of chaos, just like the man who once danced under the lion's head, faster than anyone else could follow. Chapter 3. A Hero in the Rain. The Chinese New Year had arrived, and with it the streets of Singapore overflowed with festive energy. Red and gold decorations hung everywhere, and the sound of firecrackers echoed through the city. Caleb Tan's cafe, modest yet charming, became a refuge from the chaos outside. Tourists and locals alike poured in, escaping the sudden downpour that had begun without warning. Rainwater tapped on the roof in heavy, rhythmic drumming, a steady soundtrack to the bustling activity inside. For Caleb, this was the perfect stage. The cafe was packed, tables brimming with steaming plates of chicken with rice, aromatic soups, and fresh coffee. Children squealed with delight, leaning forward on their chairs to watch him demonstrate his old lion dance moves. Caleb twirled, pivoted, and mimicked martial arts gestures, his eyes sparkling with the same energy he had carried decades earlier. The audience, young and old, was captivated. Maymay, his patient and ever-practical wife, worked tirelessly to keep the cafe running. Her arms were full of plates, trays, and cups, weaving between the crowded tables. She knew every customer by sight and every order by heart. Still, she couldn't help but notice the strain Caleb's performances put on the cafe. Food was delayed, orders mixed up, and some tourists began to grow impatient. "Caleb, please," she whispered sharply as he spun in a particularly dramatic move. "Focus on helping with the orders." But Caleb, lost in the joy of storytelling, paid little attention. His hands moved in sweeping circles, his feet danced across the floor, and he explained the movements as though he were performing for the grandest stage in the world. He was Quickman Tan, the man who had once been the fastest, the most skilled lion dancer and martial artist in all of Singapore. Even now, decades later, the old glory pulsed through his veins, demanding to be shared. The cafe was alive with laughter, chatter, and the clatter of dishes, until suddenly the atmosphere shifted. A large young man pushed through the entrance, soaked from the rain, his jacket dripping water onto the floor. His eyes darted nervously around the cafe, and in one hand, partially hidden under his coat, he held a dangerous-looking knife. The air seemed to freeze as he brandished it threateningly, demanding attention. "Everyone, stay calm," he shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and aggression. "I don't want to hurt anyone. Just give me what I want." The customers froze, clutching their bags, their children, and their wallets. Tourists who had laughed at Caleb's stories moments before now stared in terror. May's heart raced. She instinctively stepped in front of the guests, shielding them as best she could. Caleb, however, did not panic. His body, though slower than in his youth, remembered instincts that decades of practice had etched into muscle and mind. Time seemed to contract around him, and the years of experience, training, and mastery of movement surged to the forefront. He watched the young man with calm precision, reading the angle of the knife, the tension in his shoulders, and the fear in his eyes. With a sudden fluid motion, Caleb turned toward the intruder. His leg shot up with practiced accuracy, a motion refined over years of lion dancing and martial arts. The tip of his shoe connected with the young man's wrist, sending the knife flying into the air. The cafe erupted in a mixture of shock and awe as the would-be robber stumbled backward, tripping over a chair and collapsing onto the floor. "Why, you stupid old man!" the intruder shouted, more in disbelief than anger, as he scrambled to regain his balance. Caleb only smiled, calm and confident. "Never underestimate experience," he said, his voice carrying across the room, steady and commanding. He had acted without hesitation, his reflexes intact, his courage unwavering. The customers cheered, and even the children clapped enthusiastically, inspired by the quiet heroisms of the man they thought of as merely a storyteller. Someone quickly used a mobile phone to call the police. Within minutes, officers arrived, taking the intruder into custody, while the rain continued to patter against the cafe roof. The newspapers the next day would celebrate the event. The legendary Quickman Tan had once again proved his skill, his courage, and his quick thinking. Headlines told the story of the elderly cafe owner who had disarmed a knife-wielding robber, saving every customer in the process. For Caleb, the incident was a vivid reminder that his past was never truly gone. The skills, discipline, and sharp instincts of his youth were still part of him, ready to surface when needed. But more than that, it reminded him that life in the present still held moments where his courage and ability could make a real difference. He had transitioned from legend to elder, but he was far from powerless. May, though relieved that no one was hurt, couldn't help but scold him gently afterward. "Caleb, you could have been hurt," she exclaimed, her hands on her hips, cheeks flushed from concern. I can't believe you did that." Caleb laughed softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from his eyes. "May, sometimes the body remembers what the heart cannot forget. I couldn't let anyone be harmed. That's all." Henry, who had witnessed the entire scene from the kitchen, felt a surge of pride for his father. All the dreams he had kept in his head, all the tales of Quickman Ton that seemed like exaggeration, were proven true in one heroic moment. He realized that his father's stories weren't just about glory. They were a testament to skill, courage, and integrity. The cafe settled back into its rhythm after the excitement. Caleb continued to demonstrate moves for the children, who now watched with renewed admiration. May, finally able to focus, ensured that the orders were served properly. The visitors who had arrived earlier were mesmerized not just by the food, but by the living legend in front of them. This chapter blends action with nostalgia, illustrating that even in old age, Caleb Tan's courage, skill, and spirit endure. It captures the essence of a man who once commanded the attention of thousands, now using that same presence to protect, to inspire, and to teach. Even as time slows the body, the heart remembers, and the hero of the past remains a hero in the present. As the rain eased and the sun peeked through the clouds, the cafe resumed its lively rhythm. Caleb's hands moved through the air, feet tapping lightly, teaching children the motions of lion dancing, reminding everyone that legends never truly fade. They simply find new ways to shine. Chapter 4. Passing the torch after the dramatic events of that rainy Chinese New Year day, Caleb Tan's reputation grew even stronger. The newspapers carried the story for days, how Quickman Ton, the legendary lion dancer and martial artist of his youth, had disarmed a knife-wielding robber in his own cafe. Visitors, both old and new, came not only for the food, but to witness the man whose stories had always been larger than life, now proven true in an extraordinary act of courage. For Caleb, the attention was a pleasant surprise, though he hardly sought it. His joy was in seeing others safe, in seeing the children laugh and mimic the movements he demonstrated, and in feeling that his past skills had not deserted him. May, however, smiled with a mixture of relief and exasperation, knowing that her husband had once again made their daily routine more chaotic than necessary. Still, she could not hide her pride. The cafe began to shift subtly. With so many visitors drawn by curiosity and admiration, it became clear that Caleb's presence, while essential for his stories, was less practical for managing day-to-day business. Orders had to be served promptly, food needed preparation, and customers expected efficiency. May, along with their son Henry, who had grown into a capable and patient manager, began to shoulder more of the responsibilities. One day, Caleb approached May, smiling, but with a glint of understanding in his eyes. "Perhaps it's time I spend more hours teaching and less behind the counter," he said gently. "The cafe runs well when you two are here. I can help in other ways." May's relief was immediate. "Finally, you realize what I've been saying for years," she teased, though warmth and gratitude softened her tone. She knew Caleb's stories were priceless, but she also knew the cafe needed order, especially during busy times. Thus began a new rhythm in the Tan household. Henry took full charge of the kitchen, aided by Elizabeth, a skilled helper they had recently hired. Together, they ensured that customers received their meals promptly and that the cafe functioned smoothly, even on the busiest days. Meanwhile, Caleb's role became one of mentorship and connection. He spent his mornings teaching lion dance to eager children who had been captivated by the movements displayed during the festival. His hands moved with practiced grace, his feet tapping lightly in rhythm, even if slower than in his prime. The children watched intently, trying to match his steps, their laughter echoing through the cafe. Caleb guided them patiently, explaining the importance of precision, balance, and confidence. He shared stories of his youth, not merely to boast, but to illustrate lessons of discipline, courage, and perseverance. Maymay and Henry watched from afar, realizing that Caleb had found a new purpose. While the cafe continued to prosper under their care, Caleb found fulfillment in passing on the knowledge he had spent a lifetime cultivating. The cafe had transformed into a space not only for food and drink, but also for culture, history, and legacy. Henry, who had always admired his father's skill and wisdom, felt a deep sense of responsibility. He knew that maintaining the cafe was more than a job. It was a way to honor his parents and preserve the family's story. Working alongside Elizabeth, who had quickly become an indispensable part of the team, Henry found himself enjoying the daily challenges. Together, they created an environment that balanced efficiency with the warmth of Caleb's presence. Time moved forward, as it always does. Henry and Elizabeth eventually married, a joyful event that brought the entire community together. Caleb, though no longer the lightning-fast young man of his youth, participated in the celebration with pride and delight. He performed a special lion dance for the newlyweds, his movements slower, but filled with grace and experience, showing that mastery is not merely about speed, but about heart and intention. The wedding became a testament to the life Caleb had built, not one of solitary glory, but one enriched by family, respect, and the sharing of knowledge. He saw in Henry and Elizabeth a continuation of his legacy, a new generation who would honor the past while building the future. His stories would live on, not just in the cafe or in the newspapers, but in the hearts and movements of those who had watched him and learned from him. Even in his quieter moments, Caleb found peace. He would sit in the cafe, sipping his coffee, watching children practice the lion dance and listening to their laughter. The rhythm of the cafe, once chaotic and filled with tension, now had a gentle harmony. Caleb understood that life's greatest achievements are not measured in fame or recognition alone, but in the knowledge, guidance, and love one passes on. Maymay, ever the practical partner, noticed the change as well. While she had once struggled with the balance between Caleb's stories and the demands of the cafe, she now saw how he had transformed the very space around them. The cafe had become a bridge between past and present, between skill and mentorship, and between family and community. In the evenings, Caleb often reflected on his journey. He remembered the days when crowds cheered his name, when every movement and gesture was performed with precision and pride. He remembered the years of hard work, discipline, and passion that shaped him. But more than that, he now treasured the quiet moments, the teaching, the laughter, and the joy of seeing his legacy continue through the next generation. Caleb Tan's story, once defined by personal prowess and youthful glory, had grown richer. It was a story of family, mentorship, and the enduring power of knowledge and skill. Though his feet no longer moved as swiftly, his influence extended further than ever, touching the lives of children, his son, his daughter-in-law, and the countless community members who had come to love and respect him. The cafe, bustling yet harmonious, echoed with the sounds of life, learning, and laughter. Caleb moved among the children, hands lifted, feet tapping, showing them the circular steps of the lion dance. "Turn like a wheel," he would say with a grin. "Like a wheel. Always like a wheel." And as he danced, slower now but full of pride, Caleb understood that the greatest victory of all was not the applause of the past, but the lessons, love, and joy he could give to the future. He had passed the torch, and in doing so, he had ensured that the flame of Quickman Ton would burn bright for generations to come.